Good evening. You are tuned to Cafe Cabaret. I'm the wrong hero, and I'm warning you that the stories you are about to hear are not only true, but that none of the names have been changed to protect the innocent, because no one is truly innocent. Verily, everyone is guilty. And that is why I am presenting the wrong hero in Bob's Your Uncle. Buenas noches. Dobry wieczór. Ciao. Ciao. Yasu. There are 2,976 languages in the world. Oh, Kalinito, what's that mean? Oh, it's Greek. Is that Greek? Someone told me Yasu is Greek. Kalinito. Oh, cool. Kalinito. I like that. It sort of sounds like a dog that's addicted to cigars. Kalinito, man. Hey. Josh. What is Josh? Oh, Josh. Oh, alright. In other words, this is like, shrews the audience and stuff. Sharmuta. Sharmuta. Bachaba. What's that mean? Sticks. Sticks? Hey, what is this? Everybody's trying to get in on the outside. You know? Well, anyway, there are over 2,792 languages in the human language, not including Klingon. And in all of them, the wrong hero, that's me, is known as the avatar of the moron zeitgeist. Men call me the wrong hero. Alcoholic, drug addict, easy guy to shop for around Christmas. You know, when guys see a pretty girl, they go, whoa, man, whoa, she's really something. When they see the wrong hero, they say, security, proceed to Sector 7 at once. All gypsies report to the town square.
This guy sucks so bad.
Terrible. I'm wondering if you guys ever realized that
He's
the baseball diamond,
cheese bag.
international sport, the baseball diamond is the modern day equivalent of Mount Olympus. Holy Moses, that's right. It's like Ed Waxman. Why would I know him? He's from Washington D.C. I'm not from there. Well, I know Steve Swank is from Virginia. He's my roommate. He's a crackhead. I shouldn't say that on camera, but he invited all the other fellas in the neighborhood to come on the party at 4 in the morning. He's ringing my buzzer. That was really quite a swell time. Yes, sir. And every once in a while, he'll come back and he'll say, "Oh, can I loan you $20?" Drove all the way up from Virginia to bump $20 off of me. Well, man, I'll tell you, what dedication? No. No, so anyway, the dog's on Mount Olympus and all that. Well, the baseball diamond, that's the modern day version of Mount Olympus. And I'm thinking, well, what if they actually had something like that? Like, it's the all-star Greek god triple hitter. Cerberus, the mascot. Cicero, the umpire. Not the Roman orator, but Porky Pig's nephew. Here comes Zeus. He steps up to the plate. He's not swinging a bat, he's got a bolt of lightning. The ball, it's a hit. A high fly out to center field. Mercury, the center fielder, is up to get it. He runs, he jumps, he catches it. It's golden. Those little wings wings on his feet sure do help him out. Mercury's glove, where triples go to die. Next up is Hercules. He steps up to the plate. He's swinging 7 bats. Oops. Mount Vesuvius is just erupted. Guess it's time we're going to call that game on account of falling lava and molten rocks. Folks, next time you're watching a ball game, remember, Red God beer, because you are your own God. Red God. Well, anyway, you know, the thing is, in this holiday life, let me know when you're like bored and I will just quit, you know. This is going to be a closed-ended set as opposed to an open-ended one where I just go on until I run out of material. Because as Aldous Huxley put it in his novel of the same name, time must have a stop. Isn't that really profound? It's almost as profound as a song I once heard, which goes, I know his name was Rover, when he died down over. You hear that one? Maybe not. Or how's about, well, that's all I know. Let's see, what does it say about, if the baby starts to cry, put your finger in the baby's eye. What are you going to do with the baby? What are you going to do with the baby? What are you going to do with the baby? Eat the baby? Hey, you and Jonathan Swift, man. Hey, Dean Swift, swinging with the D. Yes, sir. Which reminds me, you know, Mark passed away on Christmas Day, and I'm sure you were a big fan of him, sir. And as was I, as are all right-thinking individuals. Yes, he's from Steubenville, Ohio, not far from my own birthplace, which is McKeesport, Pennsylvania. You see? We're looking for the affiliation here. There is none. I'm from Pittsburgh. You guys are from what, Washington, D.C.? Charleston, Virginia? Oh, Charlottesville. Ooh, guy. You ever been down to the New River? You ever go to the New River? New River Gorge? Yeah, isn't that the most beautiful? It is. But only 2 trains a week go through it. It used to be, there'd be a train going through there every day. Round trip. 14 trips a week. No, I know that because I took a train trip across the United States. Yes, sure. Because I believe see America first. And I believe buy American, steal Japanese. You know? So that's my motto. Anyway, I've completely lost my faith in science and religion. So I canceled all my subscriptions to all of my magazines. I don't get Commonweal. I don't get the National Review. I don't get the New Republic. I don't get Scientific American. I canceled all my subscriptions, and now I just subscribe to one magazine. It's called Superstitious Caveman. And the first issue was dated, 1 million BC, January 8th, and they have some great articles in there, like fire, bad, and yes, 1 million BC. Yeah, no, actually 1,996 years ago. So, yeah, it's kind of hard. Yeah, there we go. Not only wasn't the printing press there, there were no people, but strangely they got this magazine out, so I don't know what quite to tell you. You know, Christmas time, which has just passed, is a season for giving, and it's a season for taking, and quite frankly, I prefer the latter part of that. You know something else? Okay, talk about yourselves. Today's discussion, I went from 0 to 60 in 9 seconds, and now I'm 99 years old. You know, the police are playing a new game. It's called Ghetto Monopoly, and all the cards say, go to jail. Go directly to jail. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. But if you have $200, maybe we can talk about you not going to jail. You know what I mean? Hey, you talking to me? I don't buy my phone. God, you know, I know 100,000 songs, but I only know like one line for each of them. You know, like, I got a yellow gal I can't keep. Now, that's a really great, blues song, and it's like, yeah, I learn that every day. I got a yellow gal I can't keep. Or, the bees made honey, and lions and good God. Walk down Central Square any day of the week, you're going to see this, a bee making honey in a lion's head. You're going to see it. Stuff is a lot stranger than that, too. You stick around long enough. There's a song I wrote, it's called, My dog was my best friend, so I had to kill him. Thanks. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, you know, I do too, actually, because a dog is a man's best friend, and when you think about it, you know, yeah, all your best friends piss in the corner. All your best friends vomit kibbles and bits on the linoleum. And most of all your best friends beg for treats with their genitalia exposed, you know. Well, I'll tell you a little something I did. I glued my balls together. Oh, I figure if you can't lick them, join them. You know? Wah, wah. Yeah. All right. Yeah, hey, you're on the drums, man. Oh, sorry. You ever hear that Beach Boys album with the song Denny's Drums? Man, you ever listen to Beach Boys albums? They always have one filler track, you know. One really terrible song, like, I'll bug in my but you're not familiar with the Beach Boys. They're so terminally lame that they're actually hip. Sort of like Dean Martin. Getting back to Dean Martin. You know, he'll never die in our hearts, mostly because he's been reincarnated as the cartoon character Sugar Bear. You know, it's like, when the moon hits you, can't get over that sugar bear. So, it's really too bad. You know, another person reminds me of Sugar Bear. One of these days, I wish I could see Bill Clinton saying stuff like, we're not going to give up until we have guaranteed health coverage for every American. And he rips off his mask and it's Sugar Bear. And he goes, oh, come on, Bob, don't let me have some of that super sugar bridge. You know, really, I love to see that sometimes. Oh, hey, well, you know, I'm no amateur. Doing this for 9 years. Okay, but you know what? I think I've just about worn out your patience, actually. And I'm very sorry for that, but I will close with a little anecdote about my childhood. When I was in 6th grade, this really dates me, that we used to be able to listen to music in the cafeteria. And one faction always wanted to hear Blue Velvet by Bobby Darin. And the other faction always wanted to hear War by Edwin Starr. And they'd be fighting over the jukebox during lunch. So every lunchtime it was like,
want to hear something?
War, blue, what is it good? No, absolutely not. Say it. And so, hey, I'll talk to you guys later. No, yeah, sorry. I'll talk to the table, sorry.
Yeah, it was very good. I thought he was very talented guy. Hey, what's your name?
The Wrong Hero.
Something from a dream. 1973. I was living with my two cousins, the good cousin Bob and the evil Nazi cousin Jeff. And 22 years ago, I spent the worst 3 days of my entire life. First, we were out in our Uncle Regis' new Cadillac and somebody poked sparklers in the roof of his car. And I was blamed because I was the bad cousin. And then I slammed the front door of my Aunt Eileen and Uncle Bob's house, and all the glass fell out, and I was blamed. And then, to top things off, me and my cousin Bob were skylarking. That's what my Uncle Bob called it when we used to run around the house. What the skylarking? What's the matter with you boys anyway? I got enough of this feather bedding. And we broke Uncle Regis' lawn chair, and we hid it in the attic, and my evil Nazi cousin Jeff found it there. Cousin Jeff had stolen some coins from Bobby Garbark, who lived down the street. His name spelled backwards was Crab Rag. This was a couple years ago, and so he said to me and my cousin Bob, I had to own up up to stealing the coins. Now you gotta own up to that chair. So we owned up to the chair. Those were the 3 worst days of my life. Well, Cousin Bob is now an alcoholic baker and he still lives at home. And Cousin Jeff is a psychotic, gun-wielding post office employee. And the only reason I bring all this up is when I was listening to Rootlock and their fine, strange stories of dementia and sadness and happiness and hope, I was reminded of those 3 worst days of my life. But now I think we're about to have the best 45 minutes to 1 hour of our lives, or perhaps at least of this month, presenting Rootlock.
Contest giveaway here while we change guitars. We'll get the man back out here. He's got something for you.
I'm a cynic. Cynics don't hate everything. They just hate the world as it is and want it to be better. I believe that politics are sports for people who are too fat to run. I believe that masturbation is the poor man's Nintendo. I believe that television is a cheering section for the side that has already won. I believe that television is chewing tobacco for the eyes. And I believe that television is autism in a box. And so it goes against my every principle to participate in this television preview out of prestigious Evansville, Indiana, written in a style that practically begs to be interpreted as all gypsies report to the town square at once. I'll give you an example. You, 1984 and a half, you have been selected to participate in a survey. All right, you monkeys, dress right, dress long, maggots, line up. You have been selected to participate in a survey whose findings will directly influence what you see on television in the future. You have been selected to evaluate not yet released television material that is being considered for nationwide broadcast. You have been selected to help represent the television viewing preferences of the entire country. Think of the awesome responsibility. We are television preview. You are robots. And if you do not obey, you will be put in the penitentiary. We are Television Preview, a nationwide television research service, and we need your help. Television Preview presents screenings of pre-recorded half-hour television segments, including programs, and commercials. Brought to you by Move Over Butter and new Fuck Off, Stupid Margarine. Here are some samples of what people have said about Television Preview. I would like to attend another preview. I thought it was fun, but I am dead. I enjoyed the program. The staff was friendly and courteous, except for the one who put owl pellets in my hors d'oeuvres. I enjoyed watching the shows. I also enjoyed giving my opinions. TV Preview was a nice change. Everybody had a nice, friendly smile. I have the heart of a small boy. I keep it in a locked box. This was the best television preview I've ever attended. Overall visit, very enjoyable. Like the fact that our opinions count. Thanks. I think the MC should be commended. He is very entertaining. Good time. I enjoyed myself thoroughly. I hope I can attend again. It was really fun and enjoyable. I want to do it again and again. Very well presented and most informative. Excellent stuff. Courteous, clear, articulate, warm, and friendly. Above all, professional. And now, anybody can answer one of 2 questions wins 2 tickets to this wonderful television preview. The first question is, what important political issue did Adirondack Constructors versus Pena decide?
Take it off!
That's close enough. Actually, it was affirmative action. Now, Ooh, last week, yeah. No more affirmative action. So, you know, everybody who's not a robot will be put in jail. So, I mean, that's cool, because I am robots, I hear and obey. And who were two of the judges who struck down affirmative action in this incredibly significant ruling? Come on, any two asshole conservatives. What? No, she wrote the dissenting opinion. Good for you. An informed electorate is a knowledgeable electorate. Well, I was very happy to participate in this wonderful impromptu giveaway, and now back to the band. Rootlock.
Thank you for hosting our most wonderful giveaway. You gave me time to turn my amplifier up. I'm serious, man. I'm just like...
Hi, I'm the wrong hero. I hope you don't mind if I narrate this portion of our evening's entertainment by lying back in my silk pajamas and languorously reclining upon my settee in the company of my faithful dog. Faithful dog, come over here. They say that brevity is the soul of wit, but I believe that that is in fact too long, and it should be something like brevity is this, or brevity is, or So for the next 1 hour and 40 minutes, I would like to tell you a story. It is a story which I am not sure how long exactly it is going to be, but I do know the title, and the title is Bob's Your Uncle. Now, I don't pick this title out of any wish or desire to baffle you with my cryptic illusions. If I wanted to do so, I would have called this Queen Anne's Fan, which, incidentally, is what the British refer to when they cock a snook, or a snoot, or a snout. You see, cock a snoot. This is a cock. This is a snoot, or a snout, or a snook. And this gesture is known as cocking a snoot. But it's also known as Queen Anne's Fan among our British friends. And I could have been cryptic and not explained that, but no, because I'm out in front. Now, this is a story, and like most stories narrated by first-person narrators, I would hate to be all-inclusive and to say all. Like most such stories, it is in fact narrated by an individual, and as opposed to, I suppose, a corporation. Hey, that's an idea. First-person corporation. There's a new literary genre for you. And then the corporation decided in 1898 that the Democrats were no longer viable prospects as presidential candidates, and so they decided to get William Jennings Bryan to run yet again for president, ensuring his defeat by McKinley, and unfortunately leading to the accession of Roosevelt the First, Roosevelt Minor, or Teddy Roosevelt, as he was affectionately known. But at least we got the spin-off sales from the sale of teddy bears, so that was an unexpected plus. I mean, on the negative side, he broke up the oil trust, he broke up the tobacco trust, he broke up the meat trust, he got the FDA into the picture, and the Harris, you know, this narcotics stuff that he tried to regulate. But on the plus side, the merchandising from the teddy bears. Anyway, like most such, I should write this down, you know, because this is a great idea, narrated by a corporation. See, I can fiddle fart around. You notice I didn't say the vulgar expression fiddle fuck for about 10 minutes or so, because actually I have 10 minutes more than I thought I would to tell this story. Anyway, like most such stories, it is in fact narrated by an individual, and usually in these types of stories what we do is we introduce ourselves by name, and that's what I'm doing now. Hi, I'm the wrong hero. I really despise that, because they have these commercials now which are like soap operas. Of course, soap operas were essentially just long commercials for soap when they originated, but now they have commercials like continued. You know, it's like, oh, who gives a shit?
You know, so what if like her lover drinks coffee? I mean, like, you know, like I care. I got more important things to worry about, like how I'm going to get by on a part-time job, where I'm going to get the money to be able to commute to Cambridge and work another part-time job, and then commute back every single night for the foreseeable 2 months or so. I'm just being driven crazy by my worries. Say, well, it takes a worried man to sing a worried song. Hi, I'm the wrong hero, and this is Bob's your uncle. And that's another thing I really hate is you get these charitable causes, like, and it's always the same thing. Something like, these termites are 8 years old and they've never eaten. Hi, I'm Sally Struthers. You know, it's like, hey, come on already. Why can't you just vary it a little bit? Like, me, you know, I'm the wrong hero. Me. Oh, and by the way, this charitable thing. Fuck that, though. Me, it's about me, the wrong hero. And, you know, I have a feeling that's sort of what Jerry Lewis is thinking when he does his telethon. Someone once, a long time ago, I think it was Lenny Bruce, for this alone he was probably banned from the precincts of honorable men, but he suggested that perhaps Jerry Lewis caused muscular dystrophy and felt so guilty over this fact that he felt impelled to rectify the situation that he had perhaps inadvertently caused. Well, Jerry's back in the news. I mean, you got the muscular dystrophy telethon, which gives him his yearly jolt of recognition. And really, for us comedians, recognition is in fact a jolt. So next time you see a comedian walking down the street, you say, hey, you're a funny guy, or something like that. And, you know, they may profess to be embarrassed or scornful, but believe me, they get this little jolt, like comparable, I suppose, to Jolt Cola or something like that, or the jolt that a user of H experiences when he first plunges that hypodermic needle into the main line, man. But anyway, yes, Jerry gets his yearly jolt out of the telethon, but you know, then you got Jim Carrey, Jerry Lewis, Jim Carrey. You know, they're almost an interlocking protectorate or a directorate or whatever you want to call it. So you can tell there's a sign of a half-educated man that he inadvertently comes up with these new concepts in the midst of coming up with, you know, doing cliches. You know, I like doing that, playing with cliches. I'll get back to Jerry Lewis in a minute, but oh, and by the way, just to keep this focused on Uncle Bob used to hate Jerry Lewis. Every time the cartoon show, Will the Real Jerry Lewis Please Sit Down, came on with its annoying theme song, here comes Jerry Lewis, well he's not over there, well he's here, there, everywhere. Every time Uncle Bob would hear that, he would bellow from the top of the stairs, turn that shit off! So, anyway, yeah, I was thinking, getting back to this thing where it's easy for the half-educated or the less than perfectly educated to go off on tangents such as I'm doing. Next time you feel bored, and I'll get back to this later too, this is like the third of my multiple digressions. Every time you feel bored, replace the word gold with God, or the word good with gold, or, you know, just switch them around a little bit. Like, gold is good, or, you know, gold is God for that matter, or God for you. So, anyway, this is a very amusing thing. So if you're bored during this presentation, just sit down and jot down a list of all of these things and send them to me, the wrong hero, care of CCTV, Cambridge, Massachusetts, 02139. No, honest, you know, for the price of a 32-cent stamp. And maybe I'll send you an audio portion, or, you know, I could send you a nice Wrong Hero show on audio tape. Really, and I'll pay the postage, and you know, I'll pay for the tape because I got all these old demo tapes because, you know, I reviewed demo tapes for the noise as well, and the ones that aren't very good, of course, I tape over, although perhaps I shouldn't say this. But yeah, Jerry's in the news because he's got Jim Carrey, right, and now Eddie Murphy, big summer blockbuster in the making. Now, you must keep in mind, we're shooting this in June. You're probably not watching it until later in the year. Yeah, The Nutty Professor, right? And you can see on every ad, written by Jerry Lewis. with some other guy whose name nobody knows. You know, Jerry came up with the whole thing, right? Basically, he wrote all the dialogue. You know, he got all the scenes. He set up all the scenes and stuff. But they had to bring some other joker in because nobody would take Jerry seriously. And you know, poor fucking Jerry. Like my heart bleeds for him. Anyway, Uncle Bob. That's the real topic of this thing, Uncle Bob. But before I get into Uncle Bob, I think I will pause and continue cooking the beans in the microwave. Is that a good idea? See, I just got this notion that cooking beans in a pot is messy and inconvenient. But if these beans haven't made any real progress after 45 minutes in the microwave, it could be that I'm doing something wrong. I put like 4 incredibly hot chili peppers in them, and I doused them in vinegar, and I stuck some garlic cloves in them, and they've been like sort of percolating along there nicely for close to an hour, but they're getting chewy. They're not really getting very soft and mushy like I presume they're supposed to get down the line. Maybe the evaporative properties of the microwave are defeating the purpose of cooking beans in the first place. Dried beans. Nature's laxative. Nature's candy-like laxative. Anyway, be right back. I'll continue this momentarily. I mean, the thing is, it's not going to make any difference to you because through the magic of the miracle of video technology, I could stop right in the middle of a sentence and return with you none the wiser. Unless, of course, you're very shrewd. I want to talk a little bit about clowns. I know this is supposed to be about my Uncle Bob, who passed away in December of 1995. But, you know, I have plenty of time, and what the heck. Well, Jerry Lewis attracted a great deal of laughter towards himself, which was of the kind which he is not necessarily very fond of attracting to himself, namely, derisive laughter which does not recognize his true genius as the poete maudit, or however you say it, of the comedy set. Sweet and low in coffee, you know? It's sort of like putting fruit cocktail syrup in whiskey or something. But anyway, yes, I chortle with my own cleverness. Jerry really attracted a lot of negative attention when he shot that movie, The Day the Clown Cried. He thought, in his sort of half-educated way, that it was going to be a grand metaphor for what people like him do, you know, the sort of reason people like him exist, to bring joy and laughter to others. You know, that's the thing. They always paper over the notion that, oh, what comedy is really all about. As Lenny Bruce put it, it's not really to bring joy and laughter to those who perhaps have very little to be joyous or to laugh about. After all, they are like doctors of the soul, for laughter is the best medicine of all. Copyright 1995, Reader's Digest 1996, all rights reserved. No, it's not all about that. It's about, look at me, you know, and then they sort of, that's the sort of baseboard, and they paper it over with the laughter is therapeutic, these sick children in the cancer ward, you know, that kind of crap, sentimental garbage, makes me want to irp. But, Bozo, Frank Avarouche, local Boston celeb, Bozo lists himself as the world's most famous clown. Like, what a distinction. What, Hitler, the world's most fiendish dictator. I mean, you could go somewhere with this, I'm sure. And see, now I'm using the standard comedic terminology. You know, you could go somewhere with this. Like, William Shatner would have been a great comedian, actually. By the way, you might have noticed that annoying hum in the background, which was from the microwave. It's no longer there because I decided to cook the beans the old-fashioned way. You know, just like Merrill Lynch, we make money the old-fashioned way by, combining into gigantic agglomerations which conspire to restrain trade. I guess I'm really into the robber baron stuff nowadays. Anyway, the world's most famous clown, and
And what were we talking about? Jerry Lewis, and he's back, you know, the Nutty Professor. Could you have anticipated that, you know, 23 years later, after his star had fallen badly into eclipse, that, you know, the guy's pushing 70. Jerry Levitz is his real name. And I guess he got his start off the Steel Pier at Atlantic City when he used to do a fake drowning act or something. Him and Dino, when they first teamed up, and I guess Sophie Tucker or someone like that. Shelley Winters sort of gave him the big break, and it's like Jerry would pretend to be drowning. Dean would rescue him. He'd be giving mouth to mouth to the poor little feller, and the homoerotic aspects of that were probably best unexplored. And then all of a sudden Jerry would spring up and say, "Come see us at Frank's Steakhouse in Hoboken, New Jersey, tonight at 9 o'clock. And they'd both run off. And I guess someone like Shelley Winters or somebody told some gossip columnist or other, maybe Leonard Lyons, maybe Walter Winchell, who knows, maybe it was even Ed Sullivan's Toast of the Town who got the scoop. And you know, the rest is history. Everybody went to see him. They busted a gut over the antics of the little shrimpy feller and the handsome Dago, and thus began a very fruitful 10-year association, and you know, which was to end tragically in the partners splitting up and blah 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 blah. And you know, but there's something vaguely queasy about Dino and Jerry when they're in the movies. It's almost as though they've become two-dimensional stereotypes, and I'm sure their live performances were just wonderful. They broke the third wall and all that crap, the Stanislavski crap, and the Bertolt Brecht alienation of the audience, and the Grotowski towards a poor theater, all that theory, jargon, crapola. Every trade has its jargon, and I'm surprised that comics don't know more about their theater. Of course, there are obvious exceptions like Robert Klein, for example. I'm sure he knows a great deal about theater. And Steve Martin wrote a successful play. Now, if he were just Joe Schmo from Kokomo, do you suppose that the Hasty Pudding or the Poets Theater or whoever it was in Cambridge, you suppose they would have like given him the time of day? See, that's the problem. Comedians nowadays, they don't do it expecting to be career comedians. They do it as a stepping stone to something else. The theater, movies, what have you, becoming a talk show host. Look at Rosie O'Donnell. Or, see, you know, that's the thing. That's sort of unusual that a comic becomes a daytime talk show host. So who knows? Maybe Rosie's onto something. She's carving out her own franchise, just like Roseanne did. And you know, the Dog's Head is dangerously close to the rocking chair rocker, but I don't think John F. Kennedy's ghost is going to be paying us a visit and sitting in that rocker. So I suppose the Dog's Head is safe. I spent an hour and a half brushing this dog a couple days ago. You would not believe, gigantic tufts of fur. I wish I could show you a picture of the dog, but she doesn't seem to want to cooperate. Anyway, yeah, Steve Martin jumps into motion pictures, and, you know, Jay Leno, talk show host, evening talk show host. Although, you know, Jay, you got to give Jay credit, he still goes out there whenever he can, or he did at one time. I can't imagine. He never takes a vacation. The guy's a comedy machine. And, you know, some nights he's on, sometimes he's a little less on. But even on his worst night, he's got the name recognition. He's a brand name. And he doesn't really, it's so natural to him now that he doesn't really have to rehearse per se. And, you know, I work the same way all comics work. I got the cue cards, you know, for the new material, and I got the cheat sheets for the old material, the set lists, let's call it. And, you know, you don't really need the set list, but it's just nice to have it there, because you've got all this stuff memorized, you just don't have it put in any sort of specific order. And what happens when you don't have a set list or a cheat sheet is something very much like this. You know, digressing all over the place. And, you know, jumping from one topic to another. Like, I think we're 20 minutes into this now, and I still really haven't said much about Uncle Bob. And after all, the name of this particular presentation, it's not merely a TV show, it's a presentation, like Jack Benny's television show. It wasn't merely the Jack Benny Show. How vulgar. No, it's the Jack Benny program, which sounds vaguely totalitarian, you know? It's like, Jack Benny, I do not believe that you are, in fact, our supreme leader. You know, the Jack Benny program. Everybody acts like Jack Benny. You know, this country would be a lot better of a place if everybody did act like Jack Benny. I'll tell you. Okay, you know, if everybody had a black chauffeur who had a raspy voice, boss, I don't know. You know, Rochester was a genius, by the way. Yeah, I remember one line he did. It's like, you know, boss, you gonna buy them avocados that you dropped yesterday so they put a discount on them? You know, and well, and Jack, of course, was a master of timing. If he weren't, I suppose they would have called it the Jack Benzedrine Show or something. But I shouldn't be picking my toenails on camera now, should I? See, this is called breaking the third wall. Yes. Yes. Well, you know, I was in the theater for quite some time, and we had these various theories which were in vogue for a while, and well, you know, in the 40s, it was the theater of alienation. Samuel Beckett, Bertolt Brecht. These were very cutting edge sort of things back in the 1940s. I did my senior thesis and my PhD, master's, whatever you at Yale on Bertolt Brecht's Die gute Mensch von Setsuan und dem Kaukasische Kreiderkreis. Weltanschauung oder Weltschmerz. But then in the 1950s, we had the method acting with Marlon Brando, and, well, even Marilyn Monroe dropped in and tried to pick up a few tips. And in the 60s, well, it sort of all fell apart. But then the Broadway theater became a more open medium and more relevant to the needs and the, how do you put it exactly? If I don't have lines to memorize, I'm just totally helpless. It became a more vital medium, had a certain elan. And, well, you know, by then, of course, the grand old men were long retired or dead, and then the young rising stars of the 60s, like Thomas Guare and Edward Albee, well, they were sort of in hiatus at the time, and these sort of hippies, these dreadful hippie types, came in for a while. Samuel Shepard, who doesn't have a talented bone in his body, and David Rabe, who has some interesting ideas, but otherwise I can't imagine anything of his will be of lasting value. But then that fellow, what's his name? You know, the fellow who did The Untouchables and all those crime action sorts of things. David Mamet. Yes. Now, here we have almost another Eugene O'Neill, except not quite as depressing, of course. And but you must remember that Eugene O'Neill did do one comedy, which of course was very good. And we did a musical version of Long Day's Journey into Night at the Actors Experimental Studio Antita in Losaida, which to the uninitiate is what we used to call the Lower East Side. And it was very amusing. Yes, we did a musical version of 1984 with and Three Dog Night was there. They did just an old-fashioned hate song, and as the rats were munching on Winston Smith's head, they were going, "Winston tastes good," and it was very amusing. We were young then, of course, and terribly, terribly naive about the theater. Well, this greater openness of the theater in the 70s led to Tony Kushner. Oh, marvelous, marvelous fellow. Please, excuse me. Well, that was pretty brilliant, huh? Yes, in my postmodernist fashion, not only do I do the act, but I comment on it afterwards and tell you I'm going to do it before I do it. And then after I do it, I tell you I've done it. Well, you know, it occurs to me that maybe one of the reasons I'm prevaricating, so to speak, is that I don't have an awful lot that I'd like to share with you about my Uncle Bob. Oh, but that couldn't be the reason. Nah. Or as I saw a Swedish woman say on Ingmar Bergman's Cries and Whispers. Was it Cries and Whispers or Scenes from a Marriage? Nej. Yes, it's funny. The memory plays tricks. And if I could get it to jump through a fiery hoop, I could make a bundle. But, now what was that great Stephen Wright line? You know, you can take, sometimes the best comedians, they just have one line which sort of epitomizes everything about comedy, or at least about their own persona. Let's see if I can find that one. Oh, jeepers. Oh, shucks, Ma. I don't know where I put it. Good golly. You know, if I could only search my memory and figure out what it was, where would I put such a thing? You know, that's a good question. Why, of course. It's in the bathroom, next to the toilet. You want to see a sleeping dog lie? Or you want to see a sleeping dog tell the truth for a change? Mona, come here. Like, you're really interested in pictures of my dog, right? Oh, everybody loves the little doggy, don't they? Oh, she had a huge tick in her ear. It was just unbelievable. I'm not going to zoom in on it because actually the vet took it out with some forceps. But what a mess, huh? Boy, is my girlfriend going to be mad when she finds out I goofed off the whole time instead of actually cleaning the house like I said I was going to do. Oh, God, I'm going to be in for it when she gets home. See, she doesn't know I'm just like fiddling around and wasting the entire afternoon and morning. The most productive times in the day, yes, doing this sort of thing. Why is it that every time I do one of these long monologues, no matter what the purported subject was originally intended to be, it all comes back to self-referential commentary on other creative artists, e.g., i.e., viz., comedians. Okay, here we go. Curiosity killed the cat. But for a while, I was the suspect. I mean, you can take Stephen Wright's lines and just spin off an entire persona. Not from his persona, but just from a line like that. See, and, you know, subconsciously, you watch these guys work, and the reason a lot of comics accuse each other of plagiarism is because a really classic line like that that's been honed to perfection becomes something of a fetish or an object of worship or almost a commodity, and you can spin off a whole genre of humor from it. Either the copy direct, which in my case would be, there's a lot of controversy still about who killed President Kennedy, and I'd just like you to know that, as a matter of fact, I know who the killer was. I did it, but I was only 6 years old at the time, and Oswald had to put me on some telephone books and help me aim. See, now that doesn't really necessarily follow that's a direct swipe from Stephen Wright, but I'm sure that's where I got the idea, you know. For a while, curiosity killed the cat, but for a while I was a suspect. See, it's not that big a leap. So you can either copy the concept, or you can like look at it as a sort of a template, like proverbs which have been somehow strangely changed to reflect modern day sensibilities. Like an example of that second approach to revising a line like that would be something like, you can't have everything, but then again, where would you store it, even if you could? Well, I'm avoiding talking about Uncle Bob, but rest assured that we have over an hour left, and perhaps I will devote the last hour to Uncle Bob. I think I'm feeling, you see, maybe it's because my instinct is like, you know, make them laugh, and I don't have, you know, an hour's worth of incredibly humorous anecdotes about the incredibly jovial Uncle Bob to rest his soul to tell you. And so I'm afraid that I'm going to lose your attention at any moment if I start talking about Uncle Bob, who you've never met. You have no idea what he looks like. You know, where's the attraction here? Oh, some guy's going to talk about his damn Uncle Bob. What is this? The Federal Writers Depression Era Project, you know, oral history of Uncle Bob. I'd like to read you this cover letter. Well, it's actually, I got a job interview, and you know, they were really enthusiastic. There are some drawbacks to the job, but I wrote this letter to them, and I got the job. This is the first time this has ever happened, that, you know, I've gone through the interview process, and they hired me. Yeah, I mean, not the first time this has ever happened, but generally most of my jobs have been like, you know, oh, I hear you have a job open, and you just walk in, and, you know, say, yeah, we do. And, you know, I guess I'm better face-to-face, and I'm more persuasive if I'm actually actively soliciting the job with the idea that they will hire me on the spot if they want me. It's the waiting that gets to me. So I'll read you this letter. This letter is like a masterpiece, okay, because it got me this job. Dear, I won't give their names. First of all, I'd like to thank you for agreeing to meet with me on such short notice to discuss the job opening for the position of ILL assistant. I'm glad we had a chance to discuss the various duties the job would entail. See? Short, punchy, less than 17 words in each sentence. I was interested to discover that you were in the process of configuring your network workspaces. See, you know, the jargon here. I was interested to discover that you are in the process of, you know, I could have just said you are configuring, but they are in the process. I was interested to discover that you are in the process of configuring your network workspaces to access HELIN. We have a similar system called HOLLIS, which was upgraded last summer and is now known as Hollis Plus. It accesses those of the 100 plus Harvard libraries which are online, and also allows patrons to print out course catalogs and hard copies of the Bible and Shakespeare through Yale and Princeton respectively. I was also interested to note that you have the expanded academic index. This sounds similar, comma, if not identical to our own AI, which for now at least only offers abstracts of journal articles. New paragraph. You are looking for someone with OCLC experience. I am looking to upgrade my skills on this system and others. The position, as you have noted, pays, I'm not going to tell you how much it pays. One incalculable advantage to the position you are seeking to fill, for me, is that it is within walking distance. That factor alone would make the job attractive. And I got to digress here. See, I'm an Italian guy, and like a lot of like second, third generation ethnics, we just like to walk to work. We like to go home for lunch and then come back. You know, we like to take it easy. We don't like these like 3-hour commutes and you know, this modern enemy and disconnectedness. And you know, we're a very linked, rooted, webbed, what have you. Isn't it a pity that we have to do all our socializing over computers now? I mean, in 50 years, you know, shows like this will be a thing of the past. It'll all be on fucking computers, and you know, people just sitting around on the front porch with the screen in and sipping lemonade and chatting about old times. That's going to be a thing of the past. And anyway, There are other attractions which make me enthusiastic about the job. See, you start out, your enthusiasm. First, you wow them with your knowledge of the lingo, and then you tell them why the job would be such a good job for you, and then you show them your enthusiasm. Having majored in English and American language and literature while at college, I would be quite comfortable working in a library with resources such as yours. Working while unsupervised presents no problem for me. Once I get into the swing of things, a colloquialism, I can accomplish quite a bit while working my way down a list of things to do. At the law school library, I systematized the weeding and filing of loose leaves, so I was able to do 3 or 4 at once. At my present job, I have a similar system for newsletters. New paragraph. I understand you are looking to fill this position as soon as you can. I can be reached, blah, 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 blah. Last paragraph. Once again, thank you for taking the time off from your busy schedule to meet with me. That is like that last sentence, that's a stereotype. Sincerely. And then I sign my name. You see, I always use sincerely, because yours, it's a little too personal. Sincerely has just the right note of sincerity balanced with insincerity to work, at least for me, in this context. Gee, I hope I didn't leave a tape in there. Doesn't look like I did. Because, it'll come on at 1 o'clock. Somehow, the VCR, even though you program it to not tape on Saturday and Sunday, it'll tape on Saturday and Sunday anyway. Which is rather odd when you think about it. It's as if it has a mind of its own. Maybe, it's listening to me. Hey, don't listen to me! Well, once again, I think maybe this would be a good time for me to get up, turn this off, and then come back and turn it back on. You are tuned to Cambridge Community Television, presenting The Wrong Hero in the award-winning presentation of Bob's Your Uncle. Well, I'll sure tell you one thing. Beans sure do take a lot of cooking. In fact, if I didn't know any better, I'd swear that the damn beans don't want you to eat them. I mean, well, after all, what's in it for them, right? They don't get anything out of it, except perhaps the opportunity to be sown for further consumption. Yeah, there's a whole complicated history of beans and beaniness. I guess one of the Greek philosophers, might have been Pythagoras, cautioned against eating beans. And my learned friend John Carey, who was a professor in Ireland, said that it may have had something to do with the fact that beans were used as counters in Greek elections. Was it Pythagoras, or was it Aximenides? Oh man, I can never keep them straight. Don't you hate it when that happens? And anyhow, I suppose I should talk a little bit about Uncle Bob. I knew him best as a balding man in his 40s, given perhaps to slight corpulence. Rather strangely, he had had his children later in life than is considered common for members of the lower class. I think it was in his late 20s when he had his first child, who he named not Bob, but Jeffrey. He named his second son Bob, and then his third child was a daughter named Cindy, and then his fourth child, came much later, strangely enough, was Greg, his third son, and perhaps the most well-rounded and well-adjusted of them all. Perhaps also the least intelligent, but that's another story. And I went to live with my Uncle Bob and all of the cousins and my Aunt Eileen back in 1971, in the summer of 1971, just about 25 years ago, I reckon. And now I can talk about it, at last, at long last, revealed for the first time on network or cable access television. The story of the wrong hero, who he is and how he came to be. Gee, I don't know how much of this I should tell you. How interested are you in it? you're interested, then keep watching. If not, then it's about 10 o'clock and you can watch something else. See if I care. I don't need you. Well, George Bailey, you said I was a bitter, frustrated old man, but you're a bitter, frustrated young man. Well, I suppose it all starts with whose uncle he is on whose side of the family. My father's side of the family, they had tons of kids, they're Italians and all that. This camera's slightly crooked. And but my mother's side, well, they were Polish. Purebred Polish from Warsaw. Came off the boat, gee, I don't know when they came off the boat, but I suspect it was like 1920 or something like that. I really couldn't say for sure. But it's really odd, they came from Poland, the diaspora, and they weren't Jewish as far as I know. They probably persecuted Jews. Their it was Ploski was the maiden name. It's funny, from Warsaw to, say, Abruzzi, they would have never married my mother and father if, in fact, they had been living in those two parts of Europe. But since they both happened to end up in Pittsburgh in neighborhoods which adjoined each other, the Italian neighborhood, Bloomfield, and the Polish neighborhood, Lawrenceville, they did, in fact, meet and eventually marry, while very young and impulsive, and had me when they were like 18. So they're actually quite young, and in comparison to Uncle Bob, who was a good 10 years older than either of them. Uncle Bob was the older brother of my mother. She was the youngest in the family. Robert Americus Ploski was his full name. And I suppose the Americus was in honor of the fact that he was the first child born in America. And I guess this would have been, when would he have been born? About 1930 or thereabouts. I don't know for certain. 1930, 1931. Yeah, great time to be born, right during the Depression. And I guess he was 22 when his father died. And of course, you know what that means. I guess my mother was like 12 or maybe 8. I don't know. I don't know how old my uncle was when his father died, my grandfather, who, needless to say, I've never met. But rumor has it, I guess he was an alcoholic and he died at like the age of 39 or something ridiculous like that. Let's see, 39, 29. Yeah, I guess he would have had my Uncle Bob when he was 19 years old or so. So there you go. In fact, they never talk about him, ever. I never once heard them say anything about him. And it's too bad I didn't grill Uncle Bob for the details. But as he got older, he got somewhat jovial and less inclined to, want to talk about these sorts of things. I guess when he was in his 40s, he was more inclined to talk about his childhood. But even then, he didn't talk about it much. And my mother just has a few apocryphal tales of the Ploskis in the Great Depression. Like, she would get on the streetcar, and she wouldn't have any money, so she'd put an icicle in the fare box to make it sound like the clinking of coins. And she would take that trolley downtown to where the nuns had a charitable mission and would hand out donuts, which I guess back then in that quaint era they referred to as sinkers, for breakfast. Yeah, the Great Depression left a big scar on that World War II generation. But anyway, Uncle Bob was always, he seemed preoccupied with food, which of course is a genetic trait which has been passed down to me, as you may have noticed. Right now, you see I have the microwave back on because I'm making red beans to go with the black beans. And see, I'm sort of like making a chili here. Who knows? It'll probably take hours because I didn't soak the beans beforehand, which would have been wise, I suppose. But I'm going to try my microwaving method to sort of jumpstart the process of the enzymatic breakdown of the beans. Now I hear somewhere that you're not supposed to put tomatoes in the beans until well after they're cooked, because the acid prevents the breakdown of the starchy solids which compose much of the the material nature of the beans. So putting vinegar in there probably wasn't such a good idea, since it's probably even more acidic than tomatoes. But anyway, I was disappointed to notice that the Heinz company, which incidentally is based in Pittsburgh, which is the loci, or the locus actually, of this story. I was disappointed to notice that the Heinz company gets their vinegar from sun-ripened grains. I was longing for vinegar made from moldy, dank yeast and fungi grown in horrible, mildewed cellars. But no. Only the finest sun-ripened grains are used for the purpose of this vinegar. So in other words, it's like vodka with no booze in it. Who needs that, right? Next time it's the wine vinegar, or the balsamic vinegar, even better. But the problem with the balsamic vinegar you get in this country, now I'm no gourmet, but seems to me as though the really good stuff is all in Italy, and they make it themselves, and they don't hand it out to strangers neither. And forget trying to buy it unless you're King Croesus, because 1 ounce will set you back 100 smackaroos in real money. And I don't know if anything is worth $50 for a tablespoon, except maybe uranium or plutonium. I'm staring at an insect which is performing a contorted balletic arabesque on our screened window. See, all it takes to be a genius is a certain je ne sais quoi when it comes to coming up with similes and metaphors. Don't you think? And anyway, so yeah, I was digressing about food. He would feed his boys, and of course, I was like a fly on the wall. I was staying with my cousins for reasons which I will go into in greater detail as we progress. But Uncle Bob, he would go down, I guess, he worked at the A&P for like 20 years. I guess he worked on the loading dock or something. Until he was laid off, and I guess he got another job at some other market. But he would go, I guess, to a farmer's market. I don't know where he used to get his produce, but he'd come in every Saturday with big bags loaded with produce, and he'd always take the trolley to get wherever he had to go. The suburb in which we lived, Castle Shannon, a sort of largely Irish suburb, was serviced by trolley cars. Uncle Bob never had a car, as far as I know, nor did Aunt Eileen. Aunt Eileen, I guess, was the first person on my mother's side of the family to have graduated from 2 years of college, or maybe she went to a 4-year college. I don't know, but her people were more educated, I guess. I was the first person in my family to graduate from college on my father's side, and I believe on my mother's side as well, not counting in-laws. So, anyway, Uncle Bob would feed us. He'd go, "Eat 'em up, boys!" And like it did his heart good to see his husky youngsters as they devoured mounds and mounds of food. We had this weird food thing going. When I first moved in with Cousin Bob and Cousin Jeff, who will be the focus of this, Cousin Jeff, who was slightly closer in age to myself. Jeff and Bob were born virtually 9 months apart. Jeff was like 2 years older, two months older than me, and Bob was 7 months younger than me. And so Jeff figured I would get along better with him. And they were squabbling over who I would hang out with when I came to live with them over 3 successive summers in the years, 1971, 72, and 73. In the winter of 1973, I went to live in the YMCA for a couple of years. But that's another story. Geez, all the stories I could tell you. But anyway, Jeff and Bob would squabble over who I would hang out with. But Jeff didn't really have much in the way of friends, except Bobby Garbar, from whom he had stolen some coins a couple of years ago. And so I guess they were not exactly on the best of terms by then. And Cousin Bob had this good friend named Gnome Bonneberger. What a name, huh? Gnome Bonneberger. And they were weird names, you know. Bobby Plosky, Jeffrey Plosky, Bobby Garbark, which of course was crab rag spelled backwards, Gnome Bonneberger. Next door, there were these people named the Eichenmillers. Well, you know, that would seem to strongly indicate German, certain amount of German presence in good old Castle Shannon, along with the Irish and whatnot. In other words, it was sort of a Celtic Teutonic axis, so to speak, with some an admixture of Slavs. Oh, and there was the town bully named Danny Boss. Talk about your name fatality, huh? Danny Boss. I got into a fight with him one time. I was into non-violence, so I refused to hit him back. So eventually, he got tired of walloping me and stalked off, leaving me, of course, with the reputation not as an acutely principled individual of high intelligence, but a coward too stupid to fight back when struck. So, anyway, so much for passive resistance. A what? Yeah, Uncle Bob, you could tell he'd had some rough times, and but he never used to. And he had quite a temper. I'm not going to say he never took it out on us, but he had quite a temper. But his wife also had quite a temper, and then they would have these fierce Donnybrooks. Yep, sure enough, the damn VCR is taping. I hope it's not one of my tapes. Hold on, please. I'll be right back. Well, I have a feeling I should have planned this thing with the beans a little better, because now the kidney beans are cooking in the microwave, and the purple beans are going to have a big head start in terms of having been boiled in water and with various seasonings and onion and garlic over the kidney beans. So the kidney beans will be undercooked, and the other ones will be mushy and overcooked, no matter what I do. Plus, there's too much vinegar in the damn stuff. And, you know, I really should have paid closer attention, but, well, I'll be getting up like once every 15 minutes or so and tending to them beans, and then I'll finish this thing up, and I'll probably run out to Seekonk, Massachusetts to do the grocery shopping, even though it's not really necessary for me to do it. Well, actually, you know, it is kind of, because I got to get food for Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday for when I'm going to be up in Cambridge. I got a big show on Monday at Stone Soup Poets. It might be the last show I do there for quite a while, since I won't be in Cambridge as much come July of 1996. For the past year and a half, even though I've lived in Providence, I've been in Cambridge comparatively quite a bit, but that will change. It's odd that I should even be living in this area of New England at all. Patterns of migration don't generally go from west to east, but in my instance, I suppose it did, and the remainder of this hour will possibly provide you with some clue as to why I left Pittsburgh. Well, let's see. My parents divorced when I was 7, and I lived with my mother for a goodly while, but she had a drinking problem, and she lost custody of my sister, which made her even more inclined to drink and stay out and not come home for days. And so one time when she had left me there alone, yes, I was the prototype for the movie Home Alone. The police came and took me to a county shelter for 9 months, and I had an opportunity to leave after 3 months and live with my Uncle Frank Plosky, who lived in Lawrenceville, which of course was a very tough neighborhood. It was the inner city Polish neighborhood, and he lived on 40th Street. We used to live on 35th Street. On one side of 35th Street, the Polish neighborhood began, and on the other side, the black neighborhood ended. So it was rather odd. It was almost like a line of demarcation. And right around the corner from me lived a fellow named Francis Kush, Kush. From time to time, I try to call him when I'm in Pittsburgh and speak with him, but his parents always tell me he's not home. I can never seem to get a hold of him. Maybe next time, I'll go down there in person, knock on the door, see if I can't scare him up. I still remember him years and years later. That's when my whole young life began to fall apart, I think, well, my parents divorced. We were living up until I was 10 years old in a neighborhood called Bloomfield, which was the Italian enclave. But things became rather uncomfortable for my mother after 2 or 3 years after the divorce. So she moved in with her mother in Lawrenceville on 35th Street, which was probably no more than 2 miles away. But it was a whole different world away as well. This is, where I lived in Bloomfield was on one side of the Iron City Brewery, and where we lived in Lawrenceville was virtually on the other side. In fact, it was much less than a mile away as the crow flies, but if you were to take conventional pathways to get there, you could walk for 2 miles. In any event, my mother, we lived in Lawrenceville, and that's where I met people like Francis Kush and Johnny Alder. And these are really poor people. And Johnny Alder's dad was a hopeless alcoholic. He's probably dead now. Johnny Alder probably dead now too, for that matter. And it's just very sad. Well, after about 9 months, I guess, or a year, my mother started going off the deep end, and her mother, who was rather elderly, couldn't put up with her anymore. So my father helped my mother move to a new housing development called Northview Heights on the north side, the city's tough north side. Aunt Eileen and Uncle Bob lived on the south side, actually lived south of the south side. If you want a reference, Aunt Eileen and Uncle Bob sort of lived right near Library, Pennsylvania. We weren't very far from there. And Northview Heights, well, that's a little more difficult to place. It's due north of Pittsburgh. It's on the north side. The north side of Pittsburgh used to be a separate town called, I believe, Oakland, or Liberty, actually. And eventually it merged with the main city. And Northview Heights didn't exist before about 1960, as I recall, or 1955. It was a new housing development. It was mostly housing projects, very rural. North of it, there were forests. It was sort of like a frontier town almost. And when we first moved in, it was half black and half white. By the time we moved out, it was all black except for us, which gave me a rather unique perspective on racial relations, being on the receiving end of racial prejudice as opposed to being on the delivery end. Certainly broadened my horizons in unexpected ways. Well, I was in the county shelter for 9 months, perhaps a topic which should be taken up at a different time, and perhaps a full 2 hours could be devoted to it, and so I will say as little about it as possible. Only to say that it was a dangerous place to be in, and eventually it was so dangerous that I had to be, at all costs, removed from that environment. So I was sent away to Minnesota for 3 weeks, to Carleton College. Beautiful campus, wonderful place, great place to be in the summer. And the eating there, the food, it was just so good. Fresh dairy products and fresh milk, fresh eggs, butter, cheese, you name it. Just a wonderful place to live. Oh, I must have gained 4 pant sizes there. And I was only there for 3 weeks, mind you. Well, then it was, once I got out of Minnesota, I went directly to my Aunt Eileen and Uncle Bob's house in Castle Shannon. since I could not go back to the county shelter, would have been a veritable death sentence, yes. And I quickly discovered that it was Cousin Bob with whom I was the most simpatico. We used to just like make each other laugh, and we'd make each other laugh so much that our Aunt Eileen would exile us to the cellar, where we could giggle to our heart's content without annoying her with our childish foolishness. Bob would always come up with this stuff out of the thin blue sky. Like one day he walked into the house and said, "As soon as I saw your face, O Wiga, I knew you were destined to rule the universe." And it was even understood that Bobby was prone to do things like this. They would say, "Oh, there's Bobby with another one of his things," and I don't know, it's a mystery to me why my Uncle Bob named his firstborn Jeff and his secondborn was called Bob. Bob, of course, would say, "It's because they knew how great I would turn out." And but as it turns out, I don't know, Jeffrey, he's seems to be doing okay. I haven't really seen him in about 10 years or more. And Bobby, well, he's not doing so well. I will take this time to mention that, well, Bob was going to come out here and visit, but he thought better of it. One reason he was going to come out to visit was he got nailed for public intoxication and had to go to court, and they were threatening him with jail. And this was like last Tuesday, about 3 or 4 days ago. And I guess I'm going to give him a call. Who knows, he might be unavailable, he might be in detox by now, but hopefully they didn't give him a jail sentence, even though it was probably his 4th offense or something like that. No felonies, though. You know, he's just a troublesome fella. I think he's just a little too smart for that environment, if the truth be known. So there is a downbeat aspect to this story. But let's get back to when we were 14 years old, and the world was our oyster. We were so bursting with youthful energy, we would run up and down the streets of Castle Shannon. Castle Shannon was, I guess, your typical sleepy kind of ex-urban community. Approximately 8 miles south of Pittsburgh along Sawmill Run Boulevard, which right there should tell you the provenance of the place. I guess at one time it was like all wooded, and there was a logging trail which they called the Sawmill Run, and that's where they would drag the logs. But well, it had become built up, and there were all sorts of little small town type places. Well, Sawmill Run Boulevard, you know, it was sort of like a miracle mile, but not really very built up at the time. There was this place called the Red, White, and Blue Store, sort of like a Goodwill. Presumably they did not sell red, white, and blue beer, which is made from the dregs of the Budweiser vats. And there were, you know, ice cream type joints and gas stations and what have you. You know, kind of dreary, if the truth be known. I'm trying to think of there's no real place in Cambridge that much compares to it. Picture a virtually depopulated East Cambridge, or portions of Somerville might possibly compare with it. The Winter Hill area, perhaps. I think you'd have to go a little further afield than that. Maybe Warwick, Rhode Island, or somewhere like that. But even that is more built up, sophisticated, cosmopolitan than Sawmill Run Boulevard. But as comparatively rude-like as that area was, Castle Shannon was even more of a hick town. As ever, inevitably, there was the one bar right in the center of town, right across from the city hall, where all the, you know, regulars went, and they spent all their time after work going, you know, like dinosaurs backwards. And Castle Shannon was fortunate in that it wasn't a total backwater because it was serviced by a trolley line which ran reasonably frequently, all night long, as a matter of fact. I think there was a hiatus between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m., but pretty much all night long, and fairly consistently. And so it wasn't quite as bad in terms of location as it might otherwise have been considered. To the south, of course, was South Hills. Let's see, what do they call it? South Hills Park or South Park? Something like that. And there was a shopping mall. It was about 2 or 3 miles away as the crow flies. We used to walk along the trolley tracks to get there in the summer times. My cousin Bob and I, occasionally accompanied by his cronies. We read the National Lampoon, which was in its second or third year at the time. No, it was actually like in its first year. And we would go to the health food store on the third floor, take the free samples of sunflower seeds, and lean over the railing where the little kids on the ground floor were riding on one of those little choo-choo trains, and we pelt them with sunflower seeds as they were going around this little circular track on this miniature gauge railroad. Until, of course, the security guards got wind of our antics and chased us out of there. So we would deal with the standard mall type of teenagerhood. We were perhaps the first teenagers to hang out in the mall. And there was a much smaller kind of community mall. It was really just a shopping center. It was called, I guess, the South Hills Shopping Center. And that was considerably closer. It was, if you were to go up the backyard and walk up a hill and then down it again, and then circle around and back, there it was. Also, you could get there from the center of town just by following the railroad tracks onto a siding which was seldom used to get there eventually. And I'll tell you, we used to go into that little drugstore in that shopping center and annoy the hell out of those people. It was a soda fountain, and we would ask them for a water, please, and we would take the lemon sugars that they provided us back during the lemon craze where everything was flavored with lemons, and we would make our own lemonade and loudly boast of the money we were saving, a whopping 15 or 12 cents by making our own lemonade. So eventually they started charging us for the lemon sugars. They charged us 2 cents each, but we still boasted. We said, 6 cents and as good as a 12-cent or a 15-cent lemonade. Well, but at least they were making some money out of us, and that's what we did for fun. That was like the highlight of our day during those droningly hot Pittsburgh summers in the years 1971, 72, and 73. I guess in 71 I didn't really have a job. I believe in 72 I might have gotten one at a nearby swimming pool, a municipal pool, down Sawmill Run Boulevard about 3 miles and then up a hill right near Mount Washington. The first day I went there, I took the trolley all the way into Pittsburgh and a bus all the way up to wherever this place was, and it took an hour and a half, whereas it was only 3 miles away and I could walk there in an hour or less. Occasionally some bad teenagers in a convertible would give me a ride and ask me if I wanted to smoke cigarettes, but I refused. So they stopped giving me rides. But anyway, I did have a job during some of those, at least one of those 3 summers. This was before my father was the manager of a car wash, which of course was always a way of keeping me well employed by paying me $70 for a week of 100 hours in duration, when the minimum wage was $1.60, incidentally. And in any event, I remember those days quite fondly when all the world was spread before me, and Bob's your uncle. I'll take a break and be right back with more of The Wrong Hero in Bob's Your Uncle. Yes, we were like a sleeping dog. Young, irresponsible, foolish even. Yes, a less charitable soul might have characterized us as young, irresponsible, foolish, unsuccessful in comprehending the value of money and hard work. It seemed that when referring to his sons, Uncle Bob had access to a thesaurus in which every single adjective and metaphor for laziness was, in fact, at his disposal. So he would bluster about the house, saying things like, "Quit that skylarking, quit that lollygagging, quit that gold bricking, quit that horsing around." And he would make his sons do the yard work, which was kind of a laugh because the yard was poised at a virtual 70-degree angle outside the back door of the house. Not much would grow there, even grass, but nevertheless, Uncle Bob insisted that the yard work must be done, and as his sons ineffectually raked the unfertile soil, he would say, "That's it, boys, keep going. You're only just barely scratching the surface," which I guess was a sophisticated pun, but I didn't realize it at the time. He would make his sons take vitamins, which was rather odd. I think he was concerned that they weren't getting enough to eat. Now, Aunt Eileen, she would argue with them, but they actually loved each other a great deal. But I do recall the fact that I came to live with them, overburdening an already rather full household of 6 individuals, was a source of consternation to her, and I overheard them arguing about me. And she said, why do we have to take him in? We have enough of, to worry about. And he was saying, he's my sister's boy. We've got to do it. That was the thing about Uncle Bob. He had a great many sterling qualities, one of which was his sense of duty and responsibility. Now, he fought in World War II. He was a soldier, and I don't rightfully know what he did in the war, because he never talked about that either. Like Bob Dole, he was a member of that silent generation, which didn't like to attract undue attention to themselves, just wanted to quietly do their duty and make themselves scarce and amuse themselves how so they might, without the intrusions of the womenfolk or pesky youngsters. But I do know that he would have gone to Japan to fight if, in fact, it hadn't been for the atomic bomb. And it's quite probable that he would never have come back alive, and, of course, would never have married my Aunt Eileen and bore her children as a result. And so, if that were in fact the case, my mother may have ended up a lot less well off than she actually did. And who can measure, after all, the influence of one man? Of course, there was an entire movie, It's a Wonderful Life, about this very topic. But anyhow, I think things might have been considerably different for me if Uncle Bob had never existed. I wouldn't be doing this program. I'd probably be, who knows, probably be in jail or something. Yep, old Uncle Bob, he put me on the right path. Now, money was kind of tight with them. Like I said, they didn't drive. I got the distinct impression that it was because they felt a car was a frivolity. I believe that they did own a car at one time, but they got rid of it and never, ever again bothered with one. And you know, when you think about it, a car will cost you anywhere from $2,000 to $5,000 a year. And when you're only making $20,000 and you got 6 hungry mouths to feed, including your own, and it is 1970, who knows if he was making 20,000? He was probably making 10,000. And you know, even back then, 10,000 didn't stretch that far. That's another thing, you know, they didn't talk much about how much they made for, you know, they didn't want to get into those issues. Well, they always had money, you know, it wasn't like they were broke or anything, or that we had to live on beans and rice. And they would give me and Bob money to spend at the shops, you know, or at the mall, give us a couple bucks. Even when I was as old as 18, they would try to press money on me. Hey, you want $3 or $4, you know? Oh, no, actually. But thanks anyway. I wish I could do something for them. They don't even have a VCR. They don't want one, I guess. What good would it do them, right? All it would be good for is they don't get cable television, right? So, and if they want to watch something, they just watch it, you know, when it's on. They don't worry about time shifting or anything like that. Theirs is a slower and perhaps less pressured life than that which many of us live. One time Uncle Bob took me to the mall. We didn't walk, we took the trolley. We went to South Hills Village to you know, go to the department store. I guess it was Sears or something like that. This was just before I went to boarding school. I lived with them over the summers and during Christmas vacations and the school year. Other than Christmas vacations, I would be in Rhode Island, which is how I ended up here eventually. From having gone to high school in Rhode Island, I eventually went to college in the Boston area. Whenever somebody says they went to college in the Boston area, what they're really saying is they went to Harvard, okay? Take it from me. There's sort of unseemly coyness about where you went to college. I mean, there's two types of grads of that institution. One of them blurts it out immediately within 30 seconds. The other sort of dances around the issue because they don't want you to prejudge them on the basis of their having gone to this, you know, the world's most famous school, right? Just like Bozo's the world's most famous clown. Anyway, yeah, he was buying me my stuff, and we had the shopping bag, and on the way home, as we were waiting for the trolley to come, Uncle Bob audibly farted, which seemed kind of odd. But and then I remembered the wise advice that a substitute teacher of mine gave me in the 5th or 6th grade, or maybe it was the 7th grade or 8th. I think it was actually the 7th grade. Best let it out and bear the shame than hold it in and bear the pain. And that advice is good not only for farting, but virtually any other human activity you could name. In any event, Uncle Bob, a very, very human man. And that's why I'm proud to say Bob's my uncle. He wasn't so young that he would join his boys in vigorous physical activity, but he wasn't so old that he wouldn't go swimming with them or take them to ball games. And in fact, one time, one such ball game became a source of controversy. He was upset because me and my cousin Bob decided around the 7th inning that the ball game was boring. And so we went outside and we couldn't get back in. I tried to squeeze back in through the exit bars, but my ass was too big. See, Cousin Jeff, he was kind of on the chubby side, but he would taunt me by referring to me as fat ass. And sure enough, my ass was indeed too big. And still is, by the way. In fact, I've always had a noticeable ass. The only time that in my recall that I was ever able to get rid of my ass, if only for a few weeks, was when I was in training for wrestling in high school. Was I 14, 15? I guess the last year that I didn't have an ass was 1972. Isn't that pathetic? Yep. My buns were rock hard back then, and ever since that point, no matter what I've tried to do to get rid of my acid, still there. Uh-oh, what is that ominous popping sound? Am I dehydrating the beans too rapidly with the convection methodology of the microwave oven? You can tell I'm starting to wander here. I should have done all the Uncle Bob stuff first and then all of the digression stuff later. Anyway, Uncle Bob had all of these curious expressions that he would use, like, now you're cooking with gas. Or let's see, what was the one that he used that used to get my cousin Bob really mad? I don't remember exactly, but Cousin Bob was kind of insolent, but everybody loved it, whereas Cousin Jeff was obedient, maybe even a little puritanical and overly strict and rigid, but he could do no right, seemingly. And of course, I was the family scapegoat myself, but, you know, Cousin Jeff would like just get angry, fume, and stalk off and not talk for months if you did something that offended him. One time Uncle Bob found his Nazi flag and he tore it to pieces, and Cousin Jeff wouldn't talk to him for months and took up residence in the basement where he had his bed and where he stashed his cigars that he was clandestinely utilizing on the sly. Cousin Bob could get away with anything though. Like his father would say something like, you know, now you're cooking with gas, and Cousin Bob would say, oh, Dad, you're such an idiot. And nobody would say anything, and he would, you know, he would be insolent to his mother, and she wouldn't care. See, Jeff and Bob could get away with anything with their mother, but me, no. I had to walk on pins and needles around the A.k.a. Whereas their father was much stricter with Jeff and Bob, but never once, ever reprimanded me physically or verbally. And, you know, I mean, not that he was exactly very chummy either. He sort of took a hands-off attitude towards me, like, well, this and that, blood is thicker than water, I don't know. My sister's boy, God, I set a good example for him. I don't know what. Well, he did set a very good example for me. And I told him, when I saw him the last time in 1992, that whenever I thought of whether something was the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do, I told him I would think to myself, well, what would Uncle Bob do? And he seemed very heartened by this communique. My one regret is he was in the hospital at the Veterans Administration. He had diabetes. He had to have part of his leg amputated, and eventually he just fell into a coma and declined and died thereafter. But it's my regret that I didn't, in fact, try to call him on the phone and cheer him up a little. But not much one can do. My Aunt Eileen waited 3 weeks before she called to let me know that my uncle had died. And in fact, she didn't call me, she called my sister, who then called me. My sister lives in Erie, Pennsylvania, which I guess is less than a toll call. See, they're very conservative about that kind of thing, long-distance calls and the like. Like it's a useless frivolity, an unnecessary luxury. And in fact, they're right. I used to, when I was in high school, at boarding school in Rhode Island, I would call them, or I'd try to call them like once a week, and, well, the phone bill started racking up. My father, who did very little to support me, did in fact sometimes slip him some money, but was I ever angry when I discovered that they used the money that was supposed to go for my winter coat, for which I had already borrowed $20 from a priest, who was also my housemaster and the house disciplinarian. They had used that $20 to pay my long-distance phone bills, which doesn't sound so unreasonable now, but back then, you know, that was about the equivalent of 8 weeks of allowance. They used to give us like a $1.50 allowance every week when we were like 14, which I suppose for 1971 was plenty. It went up to $2, I think, when you were 15. So I had to like save my money for 10 weeks in order to buy this coat. It was one of those coats that you'll see on the cover of Paul Simon's first solo album. I guess they call them Arctic jackets or something. It's like, you know, one of those jackets with the fur-lined collar that sort of parka, basically. Anyway, there's the beans. I've got to tend to them, and then I'll be right back to conclude The Wrong Hero in Bob's Your Uncle. Well, anyhow, boy, those beans are taking a lot longer to cook than I thought. My buddy Dave McMahon, who's heading out to Arizona in a couple of days, who may be back by now, for all I know, said he gave me some of these incredibly hot chili peppers, little round things. He said, "Be careful, use only one." So I stuck 4 of them in this chili. It's like, woo! Well, fortunately, I only made half the beans, so when I mix the 2 beans together, it'll balance out a little. It won't be quite as hot. Anyhow, yeah, Uncle Bob, he provided the type of home where imagination wasn't strictly encouraged, but it wasn't strictly discouraged. I've always maintained that if you feed an artist and give him some idle time, he'll produce. And if you leave him with as few worries as possible, then he will be very productive. But well, Cousin Bob was kind of an artist, but he didn't realize it. Perhaps the most natural-born comedian I've ever met, and yet, where is there in Pittsburgh to pursue such interests, even if one had them strongly enough to devote the incredible amounts of time and energy that it involves? He had a real tendency to pick out the most ludicrous aspect of any situation, be it real life, imagined, or somewhere in between. Like there was this television show that, I don't remember which one, it might have been an episode of The Twilight Zone, in which some children were taunting another by standing outside his window of his house and saying, "Ugly, ugly, freak, freak," and so that was good for a laugh or two. And then there was free money, free money. That was from a Dragnet episode. These are all things that Bob would say quite unexpectedly at the drop of a hat. But of course, he used to taunt his cousin Jeffrey for being overweight. Well, as a matter of fact, they were tall boys. Bob was like 6'4". I think Jeff was at least 6 foot, possibly taller. And well, but Jeff, and they had huge feet, like size 15. They had to have their shoes custom made. But Bob would taunt Jeff because he was kind of hefty and packing on the pounds. And he would quote from this movie, Journey to the Center of the Earth, and within Jeffrey's hearing, he would say, "The fat load, he ate too much. We had to kill him. He was eating our entire food supply." And there was Tor, the hapless Tor, shot dead by Count Arnie Saknussemm, a steaming biscuit still in his mouth. Does that mean someone's coming in, Mona? Is that why you're looking at the door? Let's see if someone's coming in. Yep, downstairs neighbor's coming in. Your hearing is as good as ever. I can rely on you to be my watchdog. Anyway, so Bob would always come up with these catchphrases, and that's, of course, repetition is the very basis of comedy. And I've always felt he was a much more talented individual at this particular art than I. But, well, if I have failed to see as far or do the things that other men have done, it is because false giants have stood upon my shoulders, driving them into the ground, as it were. Well, it's interesting. I sort of moved out of there when I was 16, and but I still visited and stuff. It's just that I was getting to be a little too headstrong, and there was a constant controversy between myself and my Aunt Eileen, and I'd visit. One time me and Cousin Bob went to New York City, I believe it was in 1978, and or it may have been 79. I believe it was. It's hard to say. I think it was in 79, New Year's Eve, 1978, and well, it was a sort of spur of the moment decision, and neither of us had much in the way of money. I had been crashing at the place of my friend Richard Smalley's girlfriend, Antoinette Lafarge, had an uncle on the Upper West Side of West 78th Street who would let us crash there over the summer. I used to commute every weekend. I'd go down to, or every week actually. Every weekend I would work like 40 hours. It was a crazy schedule I had back in like 78, 77. I would go to work at, let's see, how did that work out actually? I would start work at Friday, 4 p.m., work until midnight, then I'd sleep, then I'd work from 8 a.m. until 12 a.m. That was 16 hours, and that totals 24 hours. And then I'd sleep, and again I'd work. I don't know. It was a crazy schedule. Suffice it to say, now I worked from 4 p.m. until 8 a.m. the next day. I did like 2 16-hour shifts and 1 8-hour shift, and in that way, I did 40 hours on a weekend. So I'd start work Friday at 4 p.m. and I'd get off work Monday 8 a.m. And then I would like hitchhike down to New York City and spend Monday afternoon, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday morning in New York City. And then I'd hitchhike back up to get back in time for my 4 p.m. shift as a security guard at Harvard University. And so anyway, these were the people I was staying with during that summer. And it wasn't every single week that I did this, but it was close to every week. So I lived in New York City. I know what it's like. And so we crashed there. And that's the thing, though. It never really occurred to me that that would be the one thing about our trip to New York that Bob would remember, young Bob, that we had no money. I thought he'd be much more likely to remember the fact that Nick Everstadt stomped some mugger to death, or that Mendel Moynihan locked us out of his apartment and we couldn't get back in until 6 in the morning on New Year's Day. So we had to wander the streets with no money in a freezing cold. But it was okay. We were young, foolish, heedless, headstrong, impetuous, and all them other groovy adjectives that go along with youth, inexperience. Well, then on the bus trip on the way there to New York from Pittsburgh, see, I flew into Pittsburgh, spent Christmas with the relatives, then Bob and I went back to New York City, and he got to meet my then fiancée, Melanie Dupuis, who I later broke up with. In fact, in the course of that trip, I broke up with her because, well, we were sleeping at Mendel Moynihan's apartment, and he had this vacant room with a broken window, and all we had was one sleeping blanket, and I figured we'd sleep separately from the rest and keep each other warm. But she was less romantically inclined, and I guess she must have figured that if she stuck with me, she would endure a life of poverty and privation for as long as she lived, and that any chance of having a family and leading a normal life would go straight out the window. And so that right there pretty much marked the irrevocable end of our relationship. Although I did go to visit her in San Francisco a year later, but that's a whole other story. Well, I'm winding down, I guess. But that was in 1978. That's the last time I really spent a great deal of time with Cousin Bob. I stayed in Pittsburgh for 4 months in 1980, as I recall, prior to my leaving to go to San Francisco, or perhaps no, actually I think it was just right after I came back from San Francisco and Los Angeles. I spent 3 or 4 months in Pittsburgh to earn enough money to get back to New England and away from the Midwest. And I hung out with Cousin Bob. We'd go to my Aunt Lucille's house where I lived for a summer and, hang out there. And it was fun. And we get as drunk as we possibly could, which wasn't hard, nor was it particularly wicked, since there was really virtually very little else to do. Pittsburgh was just beginning to have some sort of a punk rock scene, a good 3 or 4 years after the fact. And they had Micro Crime Fighter and the Undesirables. That's the one name, and Car Sickness. Those are basically the 2 punk bands that I remember best. And of course the Iron City House Rockers. And they had this big concert venue, the Electric Banana. My dad used to say to me, "Don't go there. I hear they sell drugs there." It's like, wow, that's quite an incentive to keep me away from there, Dad. Thanks for cluing me in. And of course the place was legendary. The owner kept a shotgun behind the bar, and he paid the bands, if he paid them at all, in old cases of Schaefer beer. And it was a real dive, a Stygian dive, you might say. Makes the Rat look like paradise, And so I spent some time with Cousin Bob, and then I made another trip back to town when my grandmother died, and we walked all the way across town in the freezing rain, and I think I caught pneumonia actually, but I didn't know it. I had this bad cold for a month. I could barely breathe. It was really terrible. But I guess before I ring off, I should tell you a little bit about an interesting incident which took place in the Oakland section of Pittsburgh. I believe I had just come back from having graduated from college, and I was on a visit to the old homestead, spending money like it was water, throwing money here and there. I must have spent $200 that weekend. Not that I could afford it, but I guess I kind of wanted to make a splash. Now, we had run-ins with the Oakland police before. One time we tried to smuggle bottles of beer in our socks, don't ask me how, to this horror movie that was playing at one of the sleazy dive cinemas in Oakland. And the cops caught us, and he said, "What are you doing?" We said, "Putting beer in our socks." They confiscated the beer, but I think they were laughing so hard they let us go. But then we were sitting around smoking reefer and drinking beer and reminiscing about old times prior to going in to see the Who film, The Kids Are All Right, or actually instead of going in to see it. And we got nailed by the University of Pittsburgh campus police, who took us to a little room. And I said, "Hey, you can't arrest us. This is a violation of our constitutional rights. What's the charge against us? We haven't done anything wrong." And they're like, "Oh, a regular Clarence Darrow, eh?" And, they were just giving us a hard time. And they played this fiendish little game where they pretended to be looking at our police records, or perhaps they really were. And they said, "This one's a little bit dirty, this one's clean." And, they just gave us a hard time. And finally they turned us over to the Pittsburgh police, who kept us in the drunk tank in a cell for like 3 hours or 5 hours or whatever. And our behavior was very different. I hadn't slept, incidentally, in like 3 days because I had been hitchhiking to get back to Pittsburgh. I guess this is just after I had breezed back into Pittsburgh, my first visit after leaving college. And perhaps the factor that made me decide that New England was my new home. So they stuck us in the drunk tank. And at first Bob was going, let me out of here, but then he fell asleep. But I, of course, having had no sleep for 72 hours, was somehow too wired to sleep. And as I lay there, I overheard the voices of some of my old nemeses from Northview Heights, the lurid housing project from whence I had escaped some 8 or 9 years earlier. Like they were saying, there he is. Hey, he's here. Let's get him. You know, and it was just so strange. Either that or I was hallucinating. But no, I don't believe so. Yep, some of the same kids that used to beat me up when I was 13 years old were in jail with me. And that's sort of when I decided two things. One, jail's a bummer and I don't want to go there anymore. And two, Pittsburgh's a bummer. I have too many bad memories there. I don't belong there and I shouldn't be there, so I was going to leave. Well, they let us go, finally, around 3 in the morning. Great time to let someone go when there's no subways or trolleys running or buses. And but before they did, they led us to where a very severely depraved-looking alcoholic was being kept, saying, "See that guy? He started out just like you. This is the way you're going to end up if you don't stop it." You know, and oh man, it's just unbelievable. They here's the funny thing though. When the Pittsburgh police came to arrest us, they put us in the squad car with handcuffs in the back seat, and you know, I was really concerned because I had like about a ½ an ounce of pot or a ¼ ounce in my front pocket, and I knew if they found that, then you know, I'd have to go to court and face a judge, and it would not have been a very pleasant time. So, somehow I managed to twist my arms in such a way that I was able to take the marijuana, which was loose in my pocket, and stuff it into my wallet. And they never searched my wallet. They searched me, but they never looked through my wallet, and they never found it. So after they let us out of the drunk tank, we walked all the way across town, over the bridge from North Side into downtown Pittsburgh, and all the way across to where the Pittsburgh Press and Post-Gazette plants are and used to be. And we went to a smoke shop and bought some papers and rolled up a joint and got high and watched the lights dance on the river. And we were so stoned that the lights seemed to be speaking to us in some sort of alien hieroglyphic alphabet. And that was probably the last time I saw my cousin Bob for quite some time. And the last time I saw my Uncle Bob, may he rest in peace. And this is dedicated to my Uncle Bob. I'm the Wrong Hero. You've been watching The Wrong Hero Presents Bob's Your Uncle here on Cafe Cabaret. That's all. The rest is silence. Good night to you all.